All righty, so working through freezing. Now we are on page 42 in the book, if you'd like to follow along and take some notes. And we have the wonderful Julie Lombardi and Liz Horton. They are returning to the stage. Of course, they were doing all these fabulous exercises with you a moment ago. And right now they are going to be talking about working through freezing. And by that, of course, we don't mean air conditioning. We mean some of those gait issues, et cetera, that you and your caregivers are muscling through, and we appreciate that so much. They're going to tell us more. Please help me welcome Liz and Julie again to the stage.
All right. Hello, hello. So I am Liz, and I'm going to be leading it off, and then Julie will be taking over at the tail end, and we're going to be talking about freezing of gait. So the things that we'll be chatting about today is what is freezing in Parkinson's, and why does it happen? And then we're going to go over some treatment strategies, so some things that you can be doing to help stay moving. So the definition of freezing, it is a brief episodic absence or marked reduction of forward progression of the feet despite the intention to walk. So often what I hear, sorry, I'm being cued that I'm too short. So often what I hear in the clinic is it feels like my foot is glued to the floor, or it is so hard to get my foot to take that first step. This typically will last for a couple seconds, and then people will be able to move through that. But for some people, it can take a longer amount of time, and they may even need to use compensatory strategies or cues that we'll go over today to help them get moving. Freezing can happen when you're trying to start your walking, when you're walking or turning, and it can be that you are trembling in place. So it could actually feel like your knees are shaking a little bit, or they may buckle. It can be a complete freeze, like you are just stuck and not able to move. Or it can be that shuffling, like your feet are sort of a runaway train. Freezing is so common in Parkinson's, and it happens in about 63% of people with Parkinson's. And freezing less common, we see it in the arms, and then you can also have freezing of speech. We won't chat about that today, but that definitely can be part of freezing. All right, so Mark, can you play the video? Perfect. So this is someone with Parkinson's during their off time. You can see their short stuff, their little shuffle there. They get stuck during that transition and flooring. Those teeny tiny steps, having a hard time starting their turn. That inside foot for that turn is just having a really hard time. He's having a hard time weight shifting onto it to get that turn going. So this may look really familiar to you. This may be, how you feel you move sometimes during the day. And then this is the gentleman, he's coming to a doorway. So often there are environmental factors that play a role in freezing. So changes in flooring, like going from hardwood to carpet, or going through a doorway or hitting a threshold. All of those can be triggers. All right, Mark, I'm gonna have you pause it for me. Thank you. And in turning, we often see the whole body moves together. There's not a lot of rotation, and you can have your feet moving a lot quicker than the rest of your body. Mark, can we go to subtypes of freezing, please? All right. There are 3 different types of freezing. There is the movement or motor. type. There is the cognitive type. So motor would be freezing while you're turning or freezing while you're starting to walk. Cognitive would be freezing while you're doing two things at once, like walking down the street and thinking about what you're gonna make for dinner later that day, or your grocery list. And then also the limbic system. So freezing when you are feeling anxious. And that can be, you have a doctor's appointment and that you are feeling rushed trying to get there on time. There can be specific triggers for freezing, and everyone is different. So, what may be a trigger for one person could be completely fine for someone else. And so just some examples. So the motor can be turning, coming to a chair, trying to move in small spaces. So like between your coffee table and your couch. Again, moving with changes in surfaces or doorways, and that first step. So once you get standing, that first step. Cognitive or attention can be walking and talking. Doing multiple things at once, like walking and trying to open up a bottle of water. Or walking and say it's Wegmans on a Saturday morning where it's so busy and lots of things to be paying attention to. And then the limbic or anxiety is feeling rushed or anxious. Some risk factors that have been found that can lead people to have more freezing of gait. It is thought that left-sided involvement, so if your symptoms started on your left side, that may lead you more towards freezing. And the idea behind that is that the right side of our brain is really in charge of processing movement and sensory information. If your symptoms began in your legs or were walking symptoms, if your symptoms are more related to trunk, maybe trunk stiffness, rigidity, slowness of movement, if you are needing to take a higher dose of levodopa, great talk this morning about sleep issues. So if you're having sleep issues or having cognitive or thinking issues, poor balance, and presence of falls, that runaway train, gait fascination, hallucinations, depression, and anxiety. And there are multiple pathways. So freezing of gait doesn't just impact one specific circuit in your brain. There are multiple pathways that we think really impact your ability to initiate and move. And so just to go through them, let's see. Nope, too far. Okay, can't see that. Okay, so the first picture is just the connection between the basal ganglia, that part of your brain that's impacted by Parkinson's, and the brainstem. And that connection impacts the rhythmicity of our movements. And when that communication gets disrupted, it's harder to have that rhythmicity of our natural walking and coordination. The second brain has to do with areas in our motor cortex. And when that and our basal ganglia have a hard time talking, it's hard to initiate movements, especially things that are pre-planned or that we've had lots of practice doing in the past and walking. That third picture is the areas that are in charge of our brain that help us with posture. So when those areas are having a hard time talking to our basal ganglia, our posture has a hard time making anticipatory changes or adjustments to react to getting moving. The fourth brain picture is our perceptional areas of the brain. And so where that plays a role is when we come into a tight space or there's changes in flooring. That's what's triggering the freezing. And that fifth brain has to do with our executive function, our higher level thinking. And that would be having to make a decision with our movements. So you may stand up and think, what foot am I going to step with to start? And that having to make a decision between two things can get us sort of stuck. All right, and so why do people experience freezing? So it can be a multi-factorial thing that happens. So these small things add up and end up with a freeze. So one of the big ones is changes in our walking pattern. So that can be asymmetries between our steps and our weight shifting or step and coordination. It can be issues with how we are processing our visual and auditory information. And then changes in our posture. So you may have seen in our big exercises that we were up big. I was cueing you to be big. So posture can play a big role in freezing. Perceptual intake of information, again, like getting through a doorway, being able to figure out the spacing between furniture can be a trigger. And then also being able to figure out or think through conflicting information. Standing up, should I start with my right foot or my left foot? And then that anxiety component. So if you are feeling rushed to get someplace, and oftentimes that cognitive, so that thinking piece of having to decide between right and left to get going, or any other decision making, and then that anxiety piece, feeling rushed, can really create some overload in how our brain is able to process information, and then it's not able to come up with the movement signal at all. And so next, Julie's gonna come up and talk about ways that we can work on treating freezing.
All right, so I'm going to get into the more of what do we do about it now? Liz talked about some of the cues that we use, so we'll kind of get into more depth about that. So there are medications that some physicians will try and different medical treatments that some physicians will try, and you can talk to your physician about. Cognitive behavioral therapy, yoga. I'm a big advocate for physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. And then there are different types of cues that we can use. So we put this slide in. This is not our area of expertise. This is information for you to kind of look at, and you could discuss with your physician, okay? Because it's talking about different medications that are sometimes used and being studied for the treatment of freezing of gait. And then some of the things that are not pharmacological, like spinal cord stimulation, deep brain stimulation, and also still something being researched is transcranial magnetic stimulation or vagus nerve stimulation. So that's in there just so you kind of know about it, but it's more for a discussion with your physician. So cognitive behavioral therapy, when we are evaluating patients and we look at certain things in the clinic to try to come up with what are your triggers, what's causing you to freeze specifically. And when we start to pick up on pieces and you start to tell your therapist things that sound like anxiety might be part of the trigger for you, that's when we start to have the discussion of, well, maybe you should be talking about talking with a licensed therapist about some of your anxiety, to help calm down the nervous system. So this is a nervous system disorder, and if we can calm down one of the pieces that's causing or contributing to your freezing, then it can help you with that freezing. That's the same kind of basis for yoga. So yoga helps to calm your nervous system down, helps to get rid of some of that fight or flight type of mechanism. And it's been found to be helpful with anxiety. And if we can help with the anxiety, we can possibly help with the freezing. So physical and occupational therapy are huge for anybody who's having any freezing. So again, when you come into the clinic, we would evaluate, how do you move? Let me put you under different circumstances and see what are some of the things that trigger you specifically. Do you have that motor piece like Liz was talking about? Are you somebody that when you try to turn, your feet get glued to the floor? Or are you somebody that when we get near a group of people and you start to feel like you're being rushed, you start to freeze? So those are the types of situations we put you in to look at what are your specific triggers and then try to figure out what are some of the cues that may help you. And a big key to this is when you start to participate in therapy, repetition is really important. High intensity, a lot of repetition is really important for your body to learn how to change how it moves. So anytime there's something that is brain related, your brain has had so many experiences repeating what you don't want it to do, right? Making you freeze. You've experienced that over and over and over again. We have to kind of undo those learned behaviors as much as we can. So we end up seeing people a lot in the clinic, like frequently. It might be 3 times a week or 4 times a week, and at first at least. So some of the things that we do, so your therapist might put you on a treadmill, and we have found in research that a long duration on a treadmill can help. Sometimes we speed it up just a little bit faster than you're comfortable with, or it might just be right at your pace. And the rhythm of the treadmill, it forces you to move at a more consistent speed. So your body's getting high repetition at a consistent speed instead of that shuffling that you get, or those asymmetrical timing that you might get when you're just walking on the floor. We also might do things like use a cue while you're on the treadmill. Put like a large ball in front of you that you have to kick over and over again. Because one of the things we see when people that have this disease is that if we give you something outside of your body to reach to or to get your foot towards, all of a sudden your movement can be a lot bigger. And so that repetition of that bigger movement, again, it kind of just reinforces and teaches your body to start moving bigger. Now, we also will work on things like balance and coordination, because if you're having issues with balance and coordination, then you're trying to walk and balance. So your brain isn't really freed up to just walk and think about walking. You're also having to think about balancing. And that goes back to what Liz was saying about some of the executive functioning, where it's hard to do 2 things at once. So if you are having to think about balancing or coordinating, carrying something while you're walking, you're doing 2 things at once. And if that's hard for you, it can cause you to freeze. So some of the strategies that I try with people. So we evaluate you, what situations you get freezing, and then we go, okay, what strategies work for you? And it's a trial and error method often. Try a bunch of stuff, see what works best, and then kind of stick to those things. So one thing is to separate out your tasks. So if you were gonna go walk and pick up a box and then turn around and walk and put that box somewhere else. So we all do that in our daily lives, right? Like I just walked, pick up a walker, came up here, and then had to get started here. But if I had freezing, I might benefit from going, I'm gonna walk, I'm at the walker, I'm gonna stop. Now I'm gonna pick up the walker and stop. Now I'm gonna turn and stop. Now I'm gonna walk again. So it's inconvenient, but it can be a strategy that can stop you from picking up the walker and then as you're turning, falling over. Taking wide turns. So a sharp turn, as you saw in that video, when you try to do a sharp turn, often the foot that's to the side that you're turning to, we often see people don't weight shift over to that foot. So if you can kind of do a wider turn So that's a strategy that can work, especially like walking in and doing an elevator and doing a wide turn there, and just learning that in general you're looking for opportunities to do wide turns. We'll again help you know your triggers and know what strategies help you the most. We talk about staying calm. I do a lot of breathing with patients. Sometimes when we first get started, we put on a breathing app that is just like a kind of a calming Zen sound, and we breathe together, and then we start moving and breathing together. And the whole point of that is really just calming the nervous system again. And I often will recommend different types of relaxation meditation apps, again, to calm that nervous system down, especially in the morning or at night before you go to bed. In the morning before you have to start moving, you do something like that to help calm everything down, to help with the freezing. And then another great strategy to help you stay focused on your walking is to count your steps as you're walking. You know, we'll say, I need to get from here to that stairs. The stairs, I think it's going to take 10 steps. I'm going to count each step out loud, and that helps me keep my attention on one task of just walking. Now, we talked about there's a motor subtype, the limbic subtype, and the, I can't think right now, the cognitive subtype. That was very appropriate. So with those three I don't really think I've ever seen anyone that was just one category. So most people that come in have a couple of things happening there. So, you know, if you're somebody that has some of that cognitive subtype, difficulty doing two things at once, at first we might say, and I've said to patients, okay, no talking while you're walking. Like for now, you're focused on walking and how you walk. So if you're with your spouse and they start talking to you, it's a great opportunity to be like, sorry, we can't talk right now. I'm just gonna walk. And also the spouse can remind them, like, let's just focus on walking. And again, trying to count each step. Mental imagery and watching movement can help. I have had patients take videos of me or somebody else walking with big movements so that they can kind of watch those videos before they get out of bed in the morning, if it's somebody that has a really hard time getting up and moving in the morning. And I've had patients tell me that it's so helpful. If I watch you walk for like a minute before I get out of bed, I can get up and walk. And sometimes pairing that with sound can be even more helpful. Other strategies, little things that sometimes help, I've been using this one a lot with some of the patients that I have right now, is just reaching to shift your weight. And so, and again, it's important to work with a therapist, because I might have somebody reach, do a really big reach, but if their balance isn't good enough on this leg, that might not be the best thing for that patient. But for some people, you know, they reach and they shift their weight. If you see me, if I reach this way, this leg is down. Sorry, I'm trying to show, and if I shift my weight far enough, it frees up my other leg to move. So then that can help with that freezing of gait and getting that first step to start. As Liz was saying, posture can really affect some of this. So a lot of people with Parkinson's get really stuck in this forward posture. And when you do that, now your weight is pulling you forward and your feet can't keep up to it anymore. So we teach people, stop. You're gonna reset the system. Stop, stand tall, get your posture back up again so it's not pulling you. The weight of your upper body isn't pulling you forward anymore. And then taking a big step. Just thinking big step can sometimes be enough to get you to start walking again. We talked about breaking down tasks into one step. You can tap a leg, like this leg, go. Saying go can sometimes help. Looking ahead at a destination in one spot might help, especially if you look ahead and then you count how many steps to get there, taking those wide turns. For some people, thinking about running, because it just kind of gets your motor system going, all right, I have to take a bigger step than I was thinking of, I have to run. And it also helps to kind of move it to the movement initiation to a different area of the brain to get you to be able to move bigger. And then for some people, it's like kind of counterintuitive, because usually we think, oh, with Parkinson's, people are too slow, we need to speed them up. But for some people, they need to slow down. So often with freezing, everything's too fast. They're talking too fast, they're thinking too fast, they're walking too fast. We need to slow it all down and get some rhythm, slower rhythm pacing back in there to move with better movement. So we're changing the focus of your attention to your steps. When we're counting steps, we're allowing you to generate movement from cortical areas rather than the basal ganglia, where that's where automatic movement comes from, but that's the area that's affected with Parkinson's disease. And again, once you free up that system for walking rather than worrying about balancing and talking, you can prioritize your focus on walking. So visual cues have been found to be very helpful. So if you guys have seen anyone using like lines on the floor or, oh, did I miss the video? I missed the video. Okay. So sometimes you can put lines on the floor to help cue you to take a bigger step. And that's where some of these devices that we have can be helpful as well. So I'm going to show you this U-step walker. So it's hard to see up here, but if you wanted to see it during a break or something, I'm sure my friend would show it to you. There's a laser light on the floor with it, and that is a cue. So if I'm having a hard time walking and my feet get stuck to the floor, if I have my laser light on, and this walking pole, Liz has the Next Stride device attached to it, which also provides a laser light, which you can see a little bit easier. If that light's on, it's a cue for my brain to step to that. So that's an external target that's helpful with freezing. So she's stuck, she stops, she looks at the light, and she can step to it. All of a sudden, the brain gets going again, and you can walk with big steps. You can use painter's tape if there's like a certain area in the house that's hard to walk through. You can use that as lines as well. We often use metronomes, so we're getting that rhythm going again. And this Next Stride device also has a metronome on it. So if you can hear that, you may not be able to hear it from up here, but it is nice and loud. So just like a metronome that you would use for piano or something, there's different speeds. So working with your therapist, you figure out what speed helps me get into a safe rhythm for walking. You can turn that on and just walk to the rhythm. This can help to normalize your walking speed. Other internal cues might be like you can sing. A song that's like really familiar with a very familiar pacing is Row, Row, Row Your Boat. And there's been a study looking at that. and they found that singing to yourself, Row, Row, Row Your Boat, and trying to stay in time with that can be helpful with your walking. So this is just listing some apps that are available that you could download so that you can have your own metronome handy in your pocket. Some of the devices, so Liz just showed the Next Stride as an attachment, and if you were to use a discount code from Liz's practice is Engage Physical Therapy and Occupational Therapy and Speech Therapy, and if you use the discount code that she has, you can get, is it $100 off of that device. And that can attach to a walker, a cane, walking sticks. That's why you were asking about that. So yes, this slide has that information about the Next Stride on it. And then of course we have to talk about home safety. Just, this is a slide you can, I think we're short on time here. So this slide just has basic things to think about with home safety. And then there's our references. Do we have time for any questions or no? No, okay. If you guys can grab one of us later if you have any questions on any of this, but again, please get into, if you have Parkinson's, you should see a physical therapist and get established with a physical therapist. Even if you think you're moving just fine, we'll most likely be able to find something to help you with. Thank you.